Let's celebrate us. Let's celebrate each other. We need to include perinatal perspectives. Be kind or be absent. Let's bring back the village. I'm Leah Lewin, the perinatal specialist.
So, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining this session in which we'll be learning about the intergenerational impact of baby loss on Black communities. My name is Patrice, and I work for SANS as a bereavement support and outreach coordinator for Black communities, and I'm the host for this evening. I'd like to introduce you to our guest facilitator who will be delivering the session today, Leah Lewin. Leah Lewin is a perinatal specialist, educator, speaker, author, and business development consultant with an unwavering passion for Black perinatal health and a focus on the impact of intergenerational trauma. She's currently writing her first book on the intersections of intergenerational trauma in the perinatal period. So thank you, Leah, so much for joining us this evening and doing this workshop for SANS. I'd also like to thank you all for coming today, whether you are a healthcare professional, have a different type of job, you're a parent, family member, or friend who's been touched by loss. We really hope this session will be a safe, supportive space where we can learn from each other. The workshop will last for around 50 minutes, after which we welcome you to stay with us for the last 30 minutes to ask any questions that you might have. We want to ensure that this session is inclusive and therefore request that you share any questions or comments that you may have through the chat box so that we can collectively discuss these after the workshop ends. You can, of course, save your question to the end too, and just to note that the Q&A part of this session won't be recorded. We understand that this session may be triggering, so please do look after yourself and take a break if you need to. Our helpline is open till 9 p.m. this evening and again tomorrow morning, should you wish to speak to a member of the bereavement support team about how you're feeling, and we will add these details to the chat as well. So now I'm going to hand over to Leah, if you wouldn't mind. I don't know if you want to do another introduction or if we just want to start.
Thank you, Patrice. Yes, so my name is Leah Lewin and I'm a perinatal specialist. Today, I really want to explore with you the profound and enduring impact of baby loss within Black communities and addressing not only the immediate grief, but also the intergenerational trauma that often accompanies such losses. And we will discuss culturally respectful care and the pivotal role that our wonderful healthcare professionals play in families' lives during the grieving process. And then lastly, we'll obviously have the opportunity to have a discussion and for you to engage and ask any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Leah. So yeah, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. Can everyone see the slides available? Perfect. Okay, we can skip on through to slide 3, I believe. So there's a little bit more information about me. Patrice has done an absolutely wonderful job of giving you all an introduction, but I will make these slides available for you all afterwards anyway, but it's just to give you a bit of background on myself and the work that I've been doing. Thank you. Next slide, please. So we're going to be looking at these 4 elements, so the impact of loss, intergenerational trauma in the perinatal period, the perinatal loss, sorry, culturally competent and respectful approaches to supporting families, the crucial role of healthcare professionals and what support is available. I aim to discuss these critical strategies to address inequalities and inequities in maternity care focusing on ethnic minorities, those that have been minoritized, sorry, and those that may also live in deprived communities. And we'll explore some really key areas within that. And I want to highlight those areas because those that are minoritized and marginalized generally have the worst outcomes when we're talking about anything within perinatal care, but especially loss. Thank you. So I just want to take the opportunity to reiterate what Patrice said. This is highly emotive content, so please be kind to yourself and others. And if you need to step away at any point, then please feel free to do so. And if you need any additional support, please reach out in the chat. You can privately message SANS, and as Patrice said, the helpline is open until 9 o'clock. If you find yourself in any immediate danger or you need urgent support, then please do contact your GP, NHS, or head straight to Accident and Emergency Department for immediate support. Okay, so let's begin with the issue of inequality. And I want to start here because I think it's really important to recognize that the term inequality and inequity, although they're related, and particularly in the context of health and social care, they're not by any means the same. So inequality refers to a difference that is measurable, or the disparities between groups or communities of people that's often observable or quantifiable, such as difference in income, in access, or the outcomes that they may experience. Whereas when we're talking about inequity, it refers to something that is unfair, often avoidable, and it's an unjust difference. So while inequalities are simply differences, inequities suggest deeper problems that certain groups are normally systemically disadvantaged due to social, economic, environmental, or other hereditary and structural factors. So when we're talking about it in the perinatal period, for example, inequity might mean that a woman or birthing person from a minority background faces a higher risk, not because of personal factors, but due to structural barriers like racism, bias, or a lack of culturally respectful care. So in short, inequality is difference and inequity is unfair. I think it's really important that we highlight that to begin with, so we can bear that in mind when we're having these conversations. One is a difference, one is a treatment, which is unfair. And when we're addressing the inequities, it often requires like a huge systemic change, as it's not merely about leaving out differences, but it's about leveling them out and ensuring fairness and access to opportunities for all people. So the impact of inequalities on pregnancy and baby loss in the UK is quite simply that Black babies die because of their race. Black babies die because of their race. And I'd like that to just sink in for a moment. That's inequity. The rates of pregnancy loss and baby deaths are higher among Black and Asian babies compared to white babies. In 2003, babies born in the UK in the more deprived areas were twice as likely to be stillborn. And between 2007 and 2017, and 2021, stillbirth and neonatal death rates for Black and Asian babies, although they'd been the same as for white babies, 1,704 babies would have survived if they weren't Black. They died because of their race. So to create effective policies, it's essential to understand where the gaps and the needs are. And this requires the collection of data, monitoring, and data related to ethnicity and socioeconomic factors, which is what we've seen in reports like the Embrace report but also you can find this information in the research and details that SANS provide on their website. Thank you, Patrice. So what do we know so far? Thanks to SANS research, we know that devastatingly, the death of a baby is not a rare event. Around between 10 to 15 babies die shortly before, during, or very soon after birth every single day in the UK. There were more than 4,500 baby deaths in the UK in 2022, of which 2,680 were stillborn. So to clarify some language as well, morbidity is pertaining to the condition of suffering or disability from clinical injury or due to medical conditions or diseases, whereas mortality is pertaining to the loss of life. So we're talking about the mortality rate, which is the number of deaths per thousand. So for the UK, for example, in 2022, the stillbirth rate was 4. The neonatal death rate was 2.9, and the extended perinatal death rate was 6.8, and that's quantified by deaths per thousand. The rate over the past decade, although they've decreased from 8.1 to 6.8, it's still not enough. And even more alarmingly, as I stated already, these rates are higher still for Black and Asian babies. Go to bed.
Honey.
Next slide, please, Patrice. So baby loss, which encompasses miscarriage, stillbirth, and the loss of a newborn, leaves a lasting imprint on parents and families. And for Black communities, the grief is compounded by the systemic disparities in healthcare that often go underaddressed. So recent research indicates that Black women and birthing people are more likely to experience stillbirth compared to their white counterparts, and the reasons are very complex. And it does include factors related to the social determinants of health and the systemic racism. The sorrow of baby loss transcends through generations. Families often carry the weight of unresolved grief, which can manifest as anxiety, as depression, or even as a physical illness in future generations. What we do know about intergenerational trauma is that it can be passed through. We saw that after the Holocaust, that when they first started to explore back in 1996, that actually, although they weren't present at the time of the trauma, they still carried it within their epigenetics. And understanding this cycle is really crucial in providing the support needed to heal and prevent additional perpetuation of trauma. So it's really vital that our healthcare providers engage with grieving Black families through a culturally respectful lens. And this involves acknowledging cultural expressions of grief, for example, understanding the historical context of our medical mistrust, and kind of pave the way for us to foster open and respectful communication. So tailoring support services to meet the cultural and individual needs of each family is really essential if we want to provide some sort of effective intervention, because we're already a step behind, which means healthcare professionals are already 2 steps behind. We need to close the gap, and that's why it's important to focus more on having equality, equity, rather than equality. Next slide, please. So, intergenerational trauma, also known as transgenerational trauma or simply generational trauma, refers to the phenomenon where trauma experienced by one generation can affect the psychological and emotional health of subsequent generations. And this concept is rooted in an understanding that the effects of trauma can transcend the individual directly affected and manifest in their descendants through a variety of mechanisms, and that includes psychological, social, and biological pathways. So there are three main modes of transmission. The first being psychological. So parents or grandparents who have experienced significant trauma may exhibit behaviors of emotional responses shaped by their traumatic experiences. And these can influence their parenting styles, their attachment patterns, and also things like their emotional availability. So, for example, a parent who had experienced severe trauma may struggle with trust and intimacy, which can impact their child's sense of security and attachment with them. The other form of transmission is socially. So children and grandchildren can inherit the effects of trauma through family dynamics, through cultural practices, family traditions, and shared narratives. In families where trauma has then led to dysfunction or domestic violence, substance abuse, or other mental health issues, children may then grow up in environments where they start to perpetuate those cycles of trauma. And that's where we see things like ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences, starting to manifest in each generation. Additionally, cultural narratives about past traumas, such as historical expression or mass violence, can shape a community's identity and individual self-concepts. And then lastly, we have biological. So emerging research in the field of epigenetics suggests that trauma can leave a biomarker on an individual's genes, which can then be passed down to subsequent generations. So these epigenetic changes, they don't alter the DNA, but they can influence how the genes are then expressed, potentially affecting an individual's stress response, for example, their fight or flight mode, their vulnerability to mental health disorders and other psychological or physiological functions. Intergenerational trauma, particularly in the context of baby loss, manifests in various definitive forms that can really, really profoundly impact families across multiple generations. And I've listed a few here. So being a sibling or a parent of a parent who's just experienced loss, the siblings may inherit a hidden grief of their parents, which can lead to feelings of confusion and unresolved sorrow. They might also experience replacement syndrome, feeling like they were the child to replace the infant that was lost, where a child born after a loss feels pressure to fill the void by the sibling who passed away, which can affect their identity and also their self-worth. Second or subsequent generations of baby loss parents. So the trauma of baby loss can then echo into subsequent generations through the transmission I previously discussed and through behavioral patterns and emotional responses learned from their parents who experienced the loss themselves. And this can manifest as heightened anxiety during pregnancy altered parenting style, overprotectiveness, the term helicopter parent goes around a lot, or an unconscious transmission of just grief and fear, whether that be of their own manifestation or something that's passed down to them. We also have traditional, cultural, and historic beliefs within families. So the impact of this is that in many cultures, historical and traditional beliefs about baby loss may include notions of fate or maybe of punishment. It may be quite taboo, which can then really complicate the grieving process because there is shame and guilt shrouded in the emotions. And families may not discuss the loss openly, which then stifles the healing process and begins to perpetuate a cycle of silence and sorrow. We also have the normalization of loss or violence due to generational cultural beliefs. And I currently live between the UK and Jamaica, and this is something that I've been able to witness firsthand. The impact is that in some communities, high rates of infant mortality or maternal complications can lead to very simple normalization of loss. And this normalization can then reduce any perceived need for psychological support or further medical intervention, potentially leading to untreated trauma, and again, a perpetuation of risky health practices and the normalization of pain and grief. Another that is very apparent is being the grandparent of a lost baby. Grandparents not only grieve the loss of a grandchild, but they also bear the pain of seeing their own child suffer. And this dual layer of grief can then lead to really complex emotional states, including feelings of hopelessness, again, guilt, which might affect their relationships and their emotional availability due to such feelings of frustration and guilt. And then lastly, a slightly different kind of view of being the child of a parent that's experiencing loss. Now, this can manifest slightly different to being a sibling after loss, as I just mentioned before. Children of parents who are suffering a pregnancy or loss may experience secondary trauma. They may witness the ongoing grief of their parents, which can lead to emotional distress, fear of loss, or confusion about how to express their own feelings. And they may also feel a sense of that lingering sadness within the family unit that can affect their emotional development. So intergenerational trauma related to baby loss, although it not only affects the immediate family members, it also directly involves, but also in some ways quite subtly influences the family's subsequent generations through both their behavioral patterns and their emotional legacies. So understanding all of these different types of dynamics is really crucial for healthcare providers when we're talking about being trauma informed, to be fully trauma informed, and that's including looking at things like intergenerational trauma and how this may manifest or come about when we're supporting families. And understanding these dynamics is so key and extremely important if we want to break down these barriers and start to remove some of the disparities that we're seeing. And support systems that are aiming to provide holistic and culturally respective care, this is a must to recognize the multi-generational impact of baby loss and address both the immediate and the long-term needs of the affected families. Thank you, Patrice. So we want to consider increasing access to perinatal mental health services. As always, representation has to be prioritized. And I want to just very quickly discuss the impact of perinatal mental health and how it affects not only the mother and birthing people, but also their families and in turn, entire communities. So the perinatal period can bring unique challenges anyway, particularly for those that are facing socioeconomic hardship, um, language barriers, or a lack of support systems. However, access to mental health support during this period is often somewhat limited, especially for those in deprived communities. And losing a baby during this time can obviously have devastating impacts, which is why we need to prioritize the equity rather than the equality, as I said. Being disadvantaged and facing countless barriers is excruciatingly challenging at the best of times. And I can say that with confidence, as I have lived experience of both as a Black woman. Being the least respected and the least protected member of society in the global north is painful with or without loss. So we have to think about breaking down the stigmas. In many communities, especially those with strong cultural or religious identities, both baby loss and mental health are still stigmatized. And this stigma can prevent women and birthing people and families from seeking help, even when it's available. So when you consider not only these barriers, but you throw in other experiences like FGM as part of cultural practices and a lack of access to abortion care or seeking asylum and surviving things like war and famine, displacement, genocide, colonialism, etc., the lack of education around neurodivergency and associated behaviors, it continues to compound the detrimental disparities and the effects. And that's why we need to work harder to break down these barriers if we want to provide some sort of equality for Black and minoritized and marginalized women and birthing people when they are going through the perinatal journey, but also when they experience loss. So things like educational campaigns within these communities, possibly spearheaded by trusted local leaders that can help to normalize the mental health discussions and encourage people to seek support. Furthermore, providing training for healthcare providers on the importance of a non-judgmental, empathetic, and culturally respectful approach to discussing mental health can make people feel more comfortable when it comes to opening up and having these discussions so that they can move through these feelings of grief safely. Increasing access points for mental health services. Access to perinatal mental health services should be straightforward and convenient. Too often, people have to navigate really complex systems to receive help. And again, in a time where everything is so heavy and so difficult, adding another barrier of complexity, and that's without looking at this intersectionally, it's why people are not accessing services. It's also essential to provide targeted mental health support for vulnerable groups, such as women and birthing people, as I said, who have experienced additional traumas like asylum seekers and those that may have been in abusive relationships, and not forgetting intergenerational trauma and adverse childhood experiences if we wish to be fully trauma informed. It's why I fight so hard to form these meaningful partnerships like this with organizations like SANS to not simply just tick a box, an EDI box at that, but to really demonstrate equity and utilize these existing platforms to support families and help to identify how things like past traumas may be impacting their journey, and also educate practitioners. So developing a trauma-informed care program that includes mental health care professionals trained in perinatal mental health and intergenerational trauma and all aspects, so it's intersectional, is really, really key for the support of the more high-risk groups. Trauma-informed approaches recognize past traumas and its effects, creating safer spaces for those who may have had these adverse experiences in healthcare settings in the past and even historically. And if the government intend to support these initiatives, we must call for them to provide subsidized or even free access to digital mental health tools. And as that can significantly improve mental health support for those that may not have access because of travel restrictions due to location or financial difficulties and things like that. And that's in addition to connecting users with community groups that offer support. Next slide, please. So the role of the healthcare professional. Healthcare professionals are often on the front lines with grieving families. Their role is not just clinical, it's also about providing emotional support and understanding and advocacy. Professionals need to be trained in trauma-informed care to address not only the medical, but also the emotional needs of families that are experiencing baby loss. And again, I feel like it should be prioritized as mandatory care, because whilst we're still seeing such high rates of loss, yes, they've reduced, but they're still very high. If someone that's not trained to emotionally support a family when they're experiencing loss, this can really impact their journey. Healthcare professionals play a pivotal role in supporting families during and after traumatic experiences of baby loss. Their approach can significantly impact the grieving process and the long-term mental health of affected families. And I mean, I've listed a few things that we need to prioritize that don't necessarily need to be overthought. It can be really simplified, and prioritizing kindness. So listen, speak with honesty, be empathetic, have compassion, be clear when you're talking. At a time where a family is experiencing loss, so much is unclear. When you're providing information to them, make sure you're providing it with clarity. Take your time, slow down, make it as simple as possible so they can digest the information as easily as possible. Be mindful of your language, but most of all, just be human. Be kind and be human. Understand trauma-informed care. Trauma-informed care is essential in the context of baby loss. This approach involves recognizing the prevalence and the pervasive impact of trauma and responding in a way that avoids re-traumatization. Healthcare professionals must be educated on specific needs of families that are experiencing baby loss, acknowledging the profound emotional and psychological impact alongside the physical aspects of loss. And providing compassionate communication. So the way healthcare professionals communicate during those initial moments of loss can help shape a family's experience and the memory long-term of those events. Compassionate communication involves, as I said, delivering news with empathy and sensitivity, allowing space for parents and families to then process that information that you've just given, using clear, respectful language that avoids all of the medical jargon and the long phrases or abbreviated terms that can just cause confusion in a time where their minds are spinning and spiraling out of control. And being present and listening actively to the needs and responses of those that have been bereaved. Advocacy and support. Healthcare providers must advocate for the needs of grieving families. And this includes ensuring that they have access to appropriate mental health, that they have access to resources and support groups and follow-up care. They should guide families to these resources and help them to navigate the complexity of the pathways to receiving the support that they need. And when I talk about cultural respect, understanding the cultural background of the family, yes, is crucial in providing effective support, but you don't have to be the expert. Cultural respect means respecting traditional practices and beliefs around baby loss and grieving, even if it's different to your own. Adapting care plans to accommodate these practices without judgment. Engaging with cultural community leaders when it's appropriate to provide community-specific support. But please remember, it's not about being the expert, it's about being respectful. Cultures adapt, people have their own philosophical beliefs and family traditions. We can never be the expert in each and every human, but we can be respectful to everyone. And that includes continual education and sensitivity training. So to improve their ability to support families experiencing baby loss, healthcare professionals can engage in ongoing education about the latest research and the best practices in perinatal loss and trauma. But we also need to consider the support for healthcare professionals themselves. Dealing with baby loss regularly can be extremely emotionally taxing for everyone. And again, organizations like SANS provide them with support, and things like support and supervision, debriefing sessions and access to counseling can help to manage their stress and minimize the occurrence of things like burnout, which we're seeing happening a lot in our healthcare services. So by focusing on these areas, even just as a starting point, healthcare professionals can really significantly improve the support that they provide to families that are experiencing baby loss, which is then in hand going to contribute to better overall outcomes in terms of emotional and psychological health. And this role extends beyond the immediate aftermath of loss. It encompasses ongoing support, which will have lasting impacts. Next slide, please. So I've listed a few available support services, and this is more specifically focused on minoritized and marginalized communities. When we're thinking about the support that's currently available, it is very limited. And again, the slides will be made available, so you'll have the contact details. There are organizations doing the work to support families and professionals that are that are on a journey of loss, pregnancy and baby loss. And it's really important that we identify and share this information on those that have and continue to experience loss. Next slide, please. So just a little reflection. Again, addressing these disparities demands a commitment to culturally respectful care, personalized service options, and accessible mental health support to bridge these gaps and create a fairer and more equitable system for all. Tackling inequalities and inequities, prioritizing the inequities in baby loss and intergenerational trauma for minoritized communities is a multi-layered challenge, but we must address if we're committed to equitable healthcare. Next slide, please. So before we move to our Q&A, I'd like to just take a moment for a guided visualization. I value your engagement and your emotional energy when you're listening to such an emotive topic like this, and you've invested your time and emotional energy here today. So this will just help us ground ourselves and honor the emotional depth of today's topic. So I'd like to invite everyone to find a comfortable position and close your eyes if you're comfortable in doing so, and just take a deep breath in through your nose and slowly exhale through your mouth. I'm not going to guide your breathing because sometimes I find that feels slightly unnatural and distracting. So I'd like you to find your own rhythm and consciously working from your toes. We're just going to bring ourselves to where we're aware of the present moment. Let's just take a few deep breaths in and out, find your natural rhythm and close your eyes and gently begin to focus on your own breathing. I want you to focus on the tension that you may be feeling or holding from today's session, or just from your day in general. I just want you to physically feel it melt away. From the tips of your toes, I want you to feel your nails. Can you stretch and wiggle the joints in your toes and press into the balls of your feet? Rocking back into the soles, noticing your ankles and the way they feel. Continuing to breathe slowly and deeply at your own natural and calm rhythm. And as we move to our calves, turn your feet out and in, flexing them up and down to really stretch and loosen the muscles. Moving up to your thighs, relax any tension and continue with your breathing. I'd like you to stretch out your spine, maybe roll your shoulders, expanding your lungs with those long, deep breaths. You should stretch your neck and release any tension that you might still be carrying. Be conscious of your ears. Relax your jaw, unclench your teeth, and lower your tongue. A few deep breaths while we continue to center ourselves and feel every feature, including things like your eyebrows. Imagine a gentle wave washing over a sandy beach. With each wave, it brings calm and peace to the shore. And feel this wave of calm just wash over you, bringing peace to your heart and your mind with each breath. I want you to feel lighter, as if a weight's being lifted from your shoulders. I want you to visualize a tree standing strong and steadfast, and imagine this tree represents your support system, standing firm against the winds, offering you strength and shelter. Its roots go deep into the earth. Just as you're connected with your community, drawing strength from one another. I want you to take one more deep breath in and hold it for a moment. And as you exhale, feel yourself more grounded and present in this space. And when you're ready, just gently open your eyes and bring yourself back to the present moment. Okay. Thank you. Trace, I'd like to move into the next slide, and we can begin with the Q&A if anyone has any questions or thoughts that they'd like to share.
before we go into the Q&A, I just want to pause a moment just to thank you so much, Leah, for delivering that session. I know certainly I did. I'm sure, we all found it really insightful, and I think you very sensitively and gently covered a really important and in some ways quite difficult topic. So I really just want to thank you for delivering this. I think one of the questions in the chat was, will the slides be shared? And you said that you will share them. And I just wanted as well to ask you if you could just share quickly how people can get in touch with you if they want to reach out.
Yes, so on the final slide, there is my contact details are listed. You can find me at the perinatal specialist on social media. The website is theperinatalspecialist.com, and you can email me, Leah at the perinatal specialist.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Right, we can go into the Q&A session now, but before I do that, I did say that I would stop recording. So yes, so we will again just give my thanks to you, and we'll end this part of the session now.